I talked extensively about what is value and the different types of values, and I will talk extensively about how to value the environment and environmental externalities, but I haven't talked about why you would want to do that, and I'm going to do so now. If you want to compare the cost of emission reduction to its impacts, then it would be handy to have them in the same numeraire, money. If you want to impose a good tax, that's measured in dollars or in pounds or in euros. If you want to pay people for the environmental services that they render to you, if you want to compensate them for the damage to their environment that you have done, or if you want to compare the environment or environmental contamination to the size of the economy, to the national accounts, then in all cases you need to have money as your numeraire. You have to express things in money because the things that you're comparing them to are money, are expressed in money terms as well. And I already showed this particular citation by Robert Solow. The purpose here really is to advise policy. The purpose is not to sell the environment. The purpose is not to reduce the environment to an economic transaction. Really, the idea is here that you can push policies harder and less hard. And what you should do as a policy analyst, as a policy advisor, is advise how hard and how far policies should be pushed. And that is relatively easy for things that are traded on markets, but as you see in these pictures, if we're talking about environmental issues, they are not traded on markets. We're talking about natural beauty, we're talking about frogs, we're talking about fish and coral reefs, we're talking about landscapes and views, we're talking about the atmosphere. And essentially what you do if you're doing a cost-benefit analysis is that you're making a trade-off between the private benefits of something and the social costs of that same thing. And this includes everything, not just the people who are directly engaged in this activity, not just the polluters, but it includes also those who suffer from the pollution. And the whole aim of a cost-benefit analysis is to make those trade-offs visible. And that requires making them comparable. And making things comparable is more difficult than it may seem at first sight. Now let's consider a one-dimensional problem. So we have a things defined on the real line that you see there. Then we have situation A and we have a situation B, and it's pretty obvious that A is better than B, because if we assume that more is better, A is better than B. And if you think that less is better, then of course you just flip this sign here and you have your assessment. And it's pretty obvious if we're working in one dimension, if there's only one thing that we care about. But now let's assume that there's two things that we care about. And we again have situation A and B, and it's pretty obvious that A is better than B, because A is more in the horizontal direction and A is more in the vertical dimension. So A is better than B, or A is unambiguously more than B. And if you think that less is better, then you just flip the axis and you still have your unambiguous assessment. But now let's introduce C and D. And what is clear is that A is better than D, because it's about as good in the horizontal dimension and much better in the vertical dimension. So A is better than D. A is also better than C because it's more in the vertical, it's about the same in the vertical dimension, and it's more in the horizontal dimension, so A is better than C. But now if you want to compare C to D, you have a problem, because C scores better in one dimension, it's higher vertically, but it scores worse in the other dimension that we think about. It's to the left of D. It scores worse in the horizontal dimension. So you cannot say that C is better than D. You cannot say that C is more than D or the other way around. You just can't say. Now what you do in a cost-benefit analysis is you essentially linearize this problem. You say that we introduce some additional indicator or some indicator W that measures how much we care about things. And that is a linear combination of the, I don't know what I just did there. That is a linear combination of the one dimension and the other dimension, and we have some sort of exchange rate A that tells you how much X is worth relative to Y. And once you have done that, you essentially added up everything, and you're back in the situation where things are one-dimensional, right? So that is what a cost-benefit analysis does. It essentially comes up with a linear approximation of the things that you care about, and then uses the linear relationship to add everything up to a total monetary sum. Last time I did speak about multi-criteria analysis as well, MCA, and there's two components to that. One is that you exclude those alternatives, those options, those possible choices that you make that are just dominated, and B is just worse than C and worse than D and worse than A. So B you can just throw out as one component of multi-criteria analysis. And of course in this particular situation we also have that A is better than C and D, so you go for A, also in cost-benefit analysis. But if you assume for the moment that neither A nor B is feasible, and you have to choose between C and D, then what you can do in a cost-benefit analysis is come up with a linear combination of the dimensions, or you could use a multi-criteria analysis, and then you have some other combination of the dimensions that you care about. And the main difference between a cost-benefit analysis and a multi-criteria analysis is that a cost-benefit analysis is based on a linear approximation of your welfare function, of your utility function, whereas a multi-criteria analysis is based on a non-linear approximation of that utility function or that objective function or that welfare function, whatever you want to use it. And I emphasize that it's an approximation as well, because of course we do not know exactly what people care about. So that is why you want to express things in money, so that you can multiply your quantities with your prices, and then you come up with a total sum, and because everything is measured in money, you can actually add it up properly. So that is one purpose of monetary valuation of environmental externalities. The other is to use it to set an environmental tax and hopefully a PGU tax. Where I remind you that an environmental tax is any tax on emissions, whereas a PGU tax exactly internalizes the externality, that is, tax imposed is equal to the damage caused at the margin. So one example is quarrying. Quarrying has many externalities. Machines are typically noisy. When you take stone and other material out of the quarry, You create a lot of dust, so you create a lot of vibration and potential damage to the buildings nearby. There's typically chemicals used to purify whatever you're digging out, and that's then dumped into ground or surface water. And of course, it can look pretty ugly. The mountain goats that used to be there are pretty unhappy with the new situation and so on and so forth. There's a whole range of externalities there. So you need to, according to the economics textbook, you need to impose a good tax to solve this particular external problem. And that is what the UK government has done, and essentially has commissioned a range of valuation exercises where people try to estimate what is the monetary value of those externalities. And for sand and gravel quarrying, they found that the average willingness to pay to accept this damage was around £2 per ton of sand and gravel excavated, and willingness to accept compensation for the damages caused was around £9 per ton. And for other materials, people cared less about. So as a result of these studies, what Parliament decided in its wisdom is that for every ton of any material quarried anywhere in, I think this is the UK, but it may be England and Wales, whoever does this has to pay £2 to the Exchequer. And that hopefully reduces the incentive to do so, and hopefully the government is doing useful things with this particular revenue. The UK government also has externalities taxes on landfill, for instance, because of the greenhouse gases, because of the toxicity, because of the noise, the odor, the visual impact. It has imposed an air passenger duty that is related to the amount of greenhouse gases that are emitted, and so on and so forth. And the UK government is not the only government that does this. Many governments, particularly in richer countries, do very similar things. They impose taxes on environmental pollution, and somehow that tax is related to the damage done by that pollution.